Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. Tell us a story.
It's like many things you start building from scratch.
And then I'm like, wait, I really do like watches because
you've seen so many watches that makes you excited.
I think I really do like watches.
Yeah. I think it's a great way to see if you are a watch enthusiast.
Welcome to the Waiting List podcast. And today we have a guest that we've welcomed back, and we actually interviewed her on Instagram Live. She's Jaclyn, a.dose.of.time on Instagram. So welcome back, Jaclyn.
Thank you so much for having me again.
And as usual, I'm I'm accompanied with Alex and Long.
Hello there.
Hi.
So last time we interviewed you, it was very much in the grip of COVID, and I was still in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
And it seems that actually, I don't know how many months later, not much has changed.
No,
right? And
at
you're
least
still
not
in
for me.
Vancouver. Yeah,
Not
you're
for
still
me.
in Vancouver.
Yeah.
And these guys are sucking it up in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So how are you keeping anyway?
I'm doing well actually. So school's started since the beginning of September, but then I'm currently in a gap semester. However, I'm helping out with a few things back in Cambridge, so I've been keeping busy over here. And then I go into an office 4 times a week, because I'm currently working at a startup locally and also like helping out whenever I can. So I've been pretty busy, but then still looking for ways to go back home if possible. But yeah, that's basically it. Still stuck here. Yeah,
I think I answer for the rest of the audience that when you say, yeah, school started, I just feel fucking old, man.
Really?
Yeah, fucking
Yeah.
ridiculously old.
I feel old because when I'm driving around the Vancouver
Yeah.
neighborhood, when I'm driving around the Vancouver neighborhood and I see like students in their uniforms, especially like people wearing my uniform, and then I'm like, oh my gosh, I used to take the bus and then I used to wear those clothes to go to school, and now they're going to school, but I'm like doing nowhere near that and keeping less of a personalized schedule. And I just feel like, wow, has it really been so long since high school, really? Yeah.
Yes, it has.
Right. Yeah, it has. And I was actually talking to my mom the other day. She was like, oh yeah, my friend's sister's daughter is looking for some college tips. And then I'm like, why is she looking for college tips? The daughter is like in elementary school. And then she's like, no, the daughter is in high school. I'm like, what are you talking about? She's like, yeah, the last time you met her, she was in elementary school, but you're so old now. I was like, yeah, of course. And then I was like, yeah, the world's moving so fast right now.
I bet you
have
get
a
that
question.
a lot, right?
Yeah.
Do you guys like kind of wish you were still in uni? Because you know how when you're in uni, everyone's like, savor it. When you enter the real world, it sucks. But then when I actually got out of uni, I was like, I love it. Like, I'm so happy.
Well, if it was me, like knowing what I know now, I would have done university so differently.
Okay.
Right.
What would
I
you have
wouldn't
changed?
I totally would have changed the people I hung around with and what I did, and probably started a watch club and like not being so much of a loser, just getting smashed on the Tuesday night just because it was vodka Red Bull. Like,
Yeah.
Jaeger bombs and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, so I think I would have actually been far more productive and probably used the university facilities a lot more rather than just the bar.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's true.
That's what Alex and I chatted earlier this week. I was like, actually taking some time off gave me great perspective as to what I would want to do once I do go back. It's like, even though I still have a little bit of time left in university, but then now thinking about it, just I would spend so much time like back in my dorm hanging out with friends and not actually taking advantage of some of the resources that the school was providing, like weekly talks in the Kennedy School or the law school. So now, like, especially after I've worked a little bit and I can gather my past work experience and kind of just gather them together and reflect on that, I can certainly think of some things that I would be able to do and grasp more once I do go back. And I think I will be more motivated in that sense because in a sense, I know what it feels like not going to university, aka now. So when I do return, God knows when that will be, but I think I'll be able to savor it a little bit more.
Well, actually, you're doing university, like how you're doing it is what I probably would do if I actually had my time back again. And you're already so mature. You hang around people like way older than you.
Yeah.
But anyway, back to this podcast. Like, not everybody has heard your Instagram live. Actually, I had some great feedback from the Instagram live. A lot of people were very impressed with you, including a lot of industry people. They were actually amazed by your story, how you could get into watches in such a short space of time and get in so deep, and how you actually did it. But that's kind of like my first question. So you're a student in Harvard, a very young watch collector. How does a student even get into watches?
Yeah. So I guess my interest in watches, I always had an interest in watches and timekeeping. And my first watch, to be like 100% honest, I don't remember what my first watch was. I had them while growing up, but then I had no.
It's all right to admit it was a Daniel Wellington on this podcast.
Oh, I never had a Daniel Wellington.
Okay.
So,
Olivia Burton.
Yeah.
DKNY watch or something.
I had a lot of baby shocks. I had a lot of baby G-Shocks. But I don't remember the model, or I don't remember what they looked like. But my first real watch was when I graduated high school and I got into university, and my parents were very generous, and they gave me a mid-sized Rolex Oyster Flex Yachtmaster with the Ever Rose and the Oyster Flex bracelet. And that's the watch that I register as being my first watch, and that's the watch I wore for almost 4 years, so throughout the last year of high school and all throughout college. So that was like my most expensive accessory that I owned, and I cherished it. I wore it to everything, and then I never really needed a second watch. I would read about them in magazines and watch them on YouTube. Back then, it was mainly Watchbox reviews on YouTube by Tim. Because he would like go through so many watches every week, and you would see so many variations. So you would learn just by watching 5-minute videos every day. And then it wasn't until the last year of college, I was actually preparing to buy my mother a gift for her birthday. And I really wanted to get her something substantial, because I was graduating back then. Like, nobody knew this was going to happen, right? I was graduating, and then she was having her birthday. It was her 50th, so it was like kind of a big deal. And then I was talking to my dad. I was like, I really want to give her something the best that I could. And I had saved up some money through my previous, like, on the side things that I was doing, like some sneaker trading and a little bit of stocks and bonds. So my dad and I ended up agreeing that he was going to help me pitch in to buy her a Patek. So I had a big job on my hand, which was, okay, what do we do with this amount of money? Because I wanted to buy her the best thing that this amount could possibly buy. And I needed to do research, because it was one thing watching videos and looking at watches you're not buying for yourself or, you know, your loved ones. It was another thing of actually using that money and buying something with it. So I spent about a month doing research. I visited the boutique in New York. And then it was in that process, after getting her gift, that I was just like done. I was into it. And then I remember holding the watch that my dad and I had bought for her, and I was like, wow, this is really nice. I really want like something.
You want to keep it, basically.
Yeah, but I couldn't. So I was like, I really want something.
Here you go, Mom. Here's just a gift for you. And by the way, I'm taking it back after a day.
No, I was telling her, like, okay, can I wear it? But then I was like, nah, I felt bad. So it was so different from the one that I had, because mine was so sporty in a sense. And
which one was it?
It was a 4947G, I think. It was a annual calendar white gold with a linen dial, like a bezeled with a few diamonds, and then a blue alligator strap. It was like so classy. And back then I was like, wow, like diamonds on a watch, this is actually pretty. But then now I was like, eh. And then I was holding it, I was like, this is so different from what I have. I want something that's equally as classy and elegant and less sporty, because I've had that for four years and I wanted to try different things. So then I started, doing research more about what I wanted. And then I bought my first watch by myself, which was a vintage pre-Daytona. And that was like the first addition into my watch collecting, if you can call that. Yeah. And then it just started stacking up. It happened quite quickly because I started reading about everything, and then everything interested me. And I'm the type of person is like, if I go deep into something, then I go all out, and then it's very hard for me to get out of it. So then I just started talking to people, and I started the account to talk to more people. And once that had started, just kicked off. And then, yeah, the rest is where I am at right now.
I think that's actually a story pretty much that resonates, well, at least with me, because I think when I speak to a lot of watch collectors, they also start off with one piece and they don't necessarily go on to the next piece that quickly. So it might take a few years. And I think that certainly was the case with me, and with a lot of other people. Right? Yeah. Like you're kind of happy with it.
Yeah.
And then you kind of don't look so much, and then maybe you're still looking, but you don't actually acquire the second piece that quickly.
Yeah, well, for me, I was completely happy. I was completely happy with the gift that my parents gave me, and I didn't know where to look. I didn't need another watch, and frankly speaking, I didn't have the means to buy, and I didn't have the time to like research because I was just entered university. I think it happened pretty fortuitously because it was my last year of college and I had finished all my requirements, and then it was the year. If that had happened any year before that, I don't think I would have invested as much time into doing the research, even if it was for my mom's birthday, because it was my last year of college and I had finished everything. It was just all electives. I had more time on my hands, and thus everything came together, and that kind of I guess jump started my interest.
I think you overcame a lot of barriers very quickly. I think two really stand out to me. One is you went and bought vintage. So you weren't afraid of vintage and you went straight into it.
Yeah.
And the second thing is the money.
Yeah.
Like you went and bought a Patek. Like what I mean by the money is that it's one thing to spend, well, I mean, for a lot of people to buy even a Rolex is a massive thing in their life.
Yeah, for sure.
Then when you spend like over 20K, 30K, that mental barrier of spending that much on a watch is also a barrier that I think not many people, like people sometimes have the money, but they might not actually go and physically they have to get over that mental barrier to put the money down to receive the watch. So you overcame like two things.
I actually find it, okay, so the money thing didn't surprise me because I think the fact that Jaclyn had started buying bonds and stocks, I think that's a bigger barrier for most people because you don't see that money. You're putting it into something electronic. You don't actually know when you're going to get returns from this, right? So I think the fact that she could already master that part of her life and made buying something that was, I wouldn't say concrete. Yeah, actual, right? Like physical. It was actually less scary than investing money, in my opinion, anyways. But the thing I do find super interesting is that when I like just scroll through Instagram, most of the girls' accounts that I find that have like girls who have really nice watches, they usually have a lot of nice bags and shoes and everything. So I think for all the female listeners, they are probably thinking, okay, Jaclyn, a very feminine name. Like, is she somebody when you open a page, it's all Birkins and Louboutins and whatever. So tell us how I don't think you're a big fan of this kind of stuff, right? Like bags and shoes.
Yeah, so I actually related a lot to your last podcast. And then when I was listening to it, I was like, yeah, that's exactly. So you need like a black heels. You
Yeah.
need a pair of nude heels.
Yeah.
Those are like checklist items. Once you have those, you don't have to have multiples of them. So in my closet, let's say if you were to open up my closet right now, you would see the necessary items that you would need to go to like a career fair or a evening gala. But then I don't obsess over the details, like how these two look almost identical, but the stitching is just a little bit different. I obsess over details maybe a little too much when it comes to watches. But then I wouldn't call myself that when it comes to like heels or bags. And same thing with bags. I have like a beater bag that I would bring whenever I go out, and then I don't really find it necessary for me to own multiples of similar items when it comes to that category. So I guess I'm when it comes to like accessories, I'm definitely more how do you say it, like boyish than the typical, like the French Jaclyn, that.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of my friends know that. So like whenever they get me presents, they know that Jaclyn doesn't want like a bottle of perfume or like heels. They would get me like boots,
like hammer and nails.
Yeah, no. They would get me like less accessorized items, but more items that I can actually wear and characterize myself.
All right.
Yeah.
So what is it that about watches that you prioritize over then? Because it sounds like, all the other things like bags and shoes, you don't put much details and thought into, or you do, but you don't care about the details as much. But when it comes down to watches, you pay a lot of attention, especially the conversation we had last time. It sounded like you really searched high and low for it.
Yeah. I think for me, watches are in a way eternalized. Shoes, it's something you are expected to wear. Dan knows this. I started as a sneakerhead because I was playing high school basketball. And then I would be collecting sneakers. And there is a saying in the sneaker world. It's like, don't stock, rock. Or you stock one, you rock one. So it's actually like looked down upon if you were to buy these $1,000 sneakers and just put them in a plastic case and gaze upon them. So to me, shoes, heels, boots, whatever, they were always used to be worn. And therefore, I don't see the need to be collecting the new ones every season to hold and then like to wear later. I wear the pair that I'm wearing now, and if I see something nicer, I switch, or if it's too worn out, I switch. Same thing with bags, because oh, and by the way, like when I make purchase decisions when it comes to like bags or heels, I don't buy the hype item. So like most of the stock lists we're going after, or most of the the hype girls are going after. I'm buying the classic choice, like the most classic leather, the most classic stitching, and the most classic color, so that they don't go out of style, and they would never go out of style. But with watches, I feel like the reason why I adhere more to vintage is like they've already been through a story. They've already had a time's passage on them. And therefore, to me, they're almost eternalized. And therefore, when I buy one, it's like I don't see them as falling out of a collection. I don't know if that makes sense. So it makes me feel more secure to buy a piece, but that obviously has to fall under that I actually like one, and I actually have looked for and I've found what I'm looking for. Yeah.
So have you acquired any new pieces since we last spoke?
We last spoke like 2 days ago.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I meant, I know that. So that's why I asked the question.
Yeah, I mean, you're just going to make fun of me now. I have, but then there's like a pretty long story to that piece. So
what about since the last time we spoke on Instagram Live? So that's quite a period.
Yeah.
What pieces have you acquired?
I have. So ever since we last spoke, I remember not on the Instagram live, but then when you and I were just meeting over Zoom to get to know each other better before we did the live, you were like, why don't you have a Patek? And then I wanted to, I told you because for some reason the Patek name was still just so above me, and
Royal.
I didn't think I would handle it, or it would take a lot of effort for me to find the piece that I think I could handle at my age and what I have. So ever since we last spoke,
Totally
I have found a couple of pieces vintage that I think, are none of the, the big hitters, but they're all vintage, and I really, really like them. And I genuinely feel it's all about knowing what you like and finding it. I think the finding is very important, and it's not emphasized enough, I feel, because sometimes with vintage it's so hard to find what you want. And even when you do know there's something that you want, just finding it and looking for it is very difficult. So I find myself I've been pretty lucky to find the couple of pieces that I have purchased. Yeah, I'm very happy with them currently.
Great.
Very cool.
Yeah.
So last time last week actually, we did a podcast between the three of us, and we were talking about the current global mood due to coronavirus and how it influenced us. Wearing watches. For them in Hong Kong, it's been a very difficult experience, and also buying watches. Has that to some extent also? Did you find the same thing?
You mean like wearing?
Like, do you feel bad buying watches in this kind of environment right now? Or even to be thinking about luxury, and also the fact that a lot of watches are now just being launched online. So you don't really get to go through that whole experience offline.
Yeah. So to answer that question, I've never had an offline experience. Like, I think by the time I really started getting into it, it was already coronavirus. So I don't know any different. I don't know what it feels like to go to watch meets. I don't know what it feels like to go to the auctions or, any of the bigger events. So I've never had that experience. All I can relate to regarding to purchasing and selling and buying watches are all pretty much basically online. So when a pandemic hit, do I feel bad about purchasing them? I wouldn't say I feel bad. It's more about being smart about it and allocating the money to where you think might best fit your current life situation. And for me, it's like I have spoke to a few friends about this, and I also spoke to family members, because what I'm currently doing with some of the pieces is I'm pre-allocating some of the money that I would have spent on my tuition, because I'm taking a gap semester, and because I feel like some of the pieces are worth buying right now. I wouldn't say there was a big change in the market, but whenever a situation or an opportunity arises, I do see it, and I do my research, and if I do find it as being worth purchasing, I would go ahead and buy it. So I wouldn't say I feel bad about it. On the other hand, I think what I definitely want to point out is I am curious of what that offline experience might feel like, because with the current Rolex release, right? I was very curious of what it might, because correct me if I'm wrong, but before this big switch, they would announce the new watches at was it Basel? It was Basel, right?
Yeah.
And then it would take a few months for them to actually hit retail.
That's correct.
So
That's correct.
with this
especially
change,
in Asia as well.
Yeah, with this change, it's like after the announcement, you can actually go into your local authorized dealer to see the watches themselves.
Well, in Shanghai, you can't. Like,
really?
you go in this. Yeah, I went in the last week. The whole Rolex boutique, the whole
Right.
Rolex boutique. Forget those new models. There were four watches
Right.
watches in that boutique.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. That was
So
it.
in
On
Vancouver,
display. On display.
yeah, on
I
display.
quickly
In
on
Vancouver,
display. Yeah.
in Vancouver they actually had them on display, and then I couldn't like go and hold them, but at least you can see them in person. And that was like my first ever experience of release, and then you can go see the new watches. That was my first experience of seeing new watches, and for me to register them as new watches.
Did you go yourself?
Yeah, I went for myself. Yeah.
Yeah, see, that's one of the things that I can't wait to do with you is actually bring you to a watch meet or go to the auction.
Yeah.
Especially the last time I went with Long Long and Chester
Yeah.
in that Phillips one. You know,
Yeah. That
just to
to
see
me
someone
is,
new in that environment, like for me, brings me a lot of joy. You know,
yeah.
that happiness, right? Because we've done it and we still have fun at it, but to see those not naive eyes, but
Yeah.
eyes that haven't experienced before, it's really quite
Yeah, brand new
powerful.
eyes. I've never been to an auction. I've never been to even an authorized dealer before and registered as me going there to see new watches or see watches. For me, it was always like almost window shopping. It never registered until now. Like I want to go out and I want to go and see all these new watches. I can't.
I wonder if this is also the fact that I think amongst the four of us, because you were born later than us, you're more used to just shopping online and everything being online. Whereas even now, even though, okay, let's just say something slightly cheaper, say bags and shoes, I'm still struggling with the fact that I can buy this stuff online. Like I see it and I understand that it works, but I'm like, is something this expensive really going to get delivered to my house? Like I get scared. Yeah.
So for me, I think it was, now that I think about it, I think it has to do with me buying and selling shoes first. Yeah, because I was doing that when I was 12, right? I was doing that like after only 1.5 years spent in Canada. And then I was buying them off eBay, and it was such a bizarre experience. Like you would pay, and then I didn't know what a tracking number was, right? I had to learn that, all of that. And then because I was in Canada and most of the shoes I was buying were from the States or Europe or even sometimes Japan, there were custom issues. Like I'd say 30-40% of the time. And then I would ring, like I would call the couriers and they would tell me about certain things. And now that I think about it, like they would have thought it was bizarre talking to a child about these things, right? And whenever I sold stuff, and not to mention how many times I've been scammed, right?
Oh man.
Oh yeah, I've been scammed from head to toe, like everything.
So is your eBay rating super low?
My eBay rating is, well, I buy most of them on eBay, and then I used to sell them on Instagram in the infancy of Instagram, also YouTube.
Cool.
So I used to do unboxing videos on YouTube, and then people would comment, and then I would go on forums. So ISS or Soul Collector or Nike Talk to sell the shoes. But then I was scammed. I still remember, don't find this creepy, I still have the scammer's phone number in my phone saved. It was a dude. That is creepy. It was a dude from Toronto. I promised myself once I was celebrating my 18th birthday, where I'm an adult, I would go to like the shop he works at and just I know his name, I know his cell phone number, and I know where he works, and I remember the exact
bomb him with
details.
It.
Like you should just
details.
We should
Instagram bomb him.
Hey, do you remember? I'm the person who you were supposed to trade with me, but then I shipped you the stuff. You never shipped me any of your stuff back.
Oh God, that's bad.
So I think doing that at a young age, it normalized buying online and selling things online for me. And then, so I guess that kind of carried over when it comes to like expensive like clothes or accessories or watches.
That's really
so you kind of touched on it already with like how, you know, you're Instagram savvy and you set up your Instagram account. Your rise in the watch community has been quite rapid, you know, I would say. people know of you, and it's one of those where when you say your Instagram handle, people, yeah, I've seen that, or yeah, I know
Really?
her watches, or yeah. So there must be a lot of people reaching out to you, and how are you finding all of that?
Um, Depends on what they reach out for. So I would get DMs just to ask for information about a piece, and I'm more than happy to talk about those particulars with the person who reached out. And then most of the DMs I receive are, how much is this for sale? Like one of like those. And then I just say, sorry, no. And I'm so tempted to like put something on, like change my as a joke, change my profile picture, like do not ask for how much. Because at one point I was receiving so many that I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel bad if I don't respond, but then like if I respond, what can I say? Then those turn out.
Double tap, mate. Double tap them to death.
Yeah, I wanted to do that, but then they just keep question marking, and then I feel bad. So then I try to answer everyone. So there's always the for sales. There's always the more information. I'm trying to inquire this. Do you have any like information about it? And then there are some people who talk to me about photography like topics over what cameras do I use, or whenever I shoot with film, like how do I do that? I really enjoyed those a lot. And then there are just some people who are clowns, and that I don't really, I block. Yeah.
So you're talking about Dan, right?
No. So
Shit,
some way worse. Way worse. Yeah. No, I've received some really I wouldn't say disturbing, eye-opening messages. I received some eye-opening messages. And then
so
you can track them down.
your watch collecting journey's like being pretty short, but has it changed at all since you went online or met collectors? Previously, well, I know you're very strong into Cartier, and does that still hold true now?
Yeah, definitely. And definitely vintage Cartier. I think that's vintage / neo vintage. So all the way up to, I'd say, like 1990 or even 1995-ish. Yeah, those
I think
are
we touched, like, this is a topic that I don't think we touched enough on in the actual Instagram live, which is, we obviously said, oh, you're into vintage Cartier, but why vintage Cartier? Can you actually really explain why you're into vintage Cartier? What is it about Cartier that speaks to you?
Yeah, so I think I was also surprised by it, right? I never would have thought that Cartier would be the brand that I would be most drawn to if you were to ask me. And my first piece, I think of all the purchases I've made, again, keep in mind, I've never seen any of these watches in person. All the watches that I've purchased, except for the one like my parents gave me, that one we actually went to the boutique and bought like with me in person. All of the other ones I've never seen in person before like committing. And the one that surprised me the most, so of all of them, was my first Cartier. And it actually just came back from service this past week after being like 7 months in service in Switzerland. So, and I would say that because you associate Cartier, I don't know, for me at least, if you ask me about Cartier, I associate it with like the watches that my dad has. Those really big, chunky, all steel, like Santos 100s, or with the one with the bracelet or with the leather band. And I would associate that with my parents driving me up to like the States, and on the way back, they would stop by a duty-free shop and pick up like a Cartier before they return back to home. That was my memory of Cartier. And then when I grew a little bit older, Cartier was the love bracelet, was the Justin Clou, was the blue balloon, like the rund balloon.
Alain Bleu, right?
Yeah. I never associated that with anything Art Deco or vintage because I was ignorant of their history. And it was only after I purchased my first vintage tank. So my first Cartier was a vintage tank from 1979. It was, and only after I purchased it, I realized how special it was. So it was a platinum case with burgundy numerals and a ruby capuchon with burgundy hands. And I started doing research after I bought it, which is what I normally do. I try to do as much research before the purchase, but then after buying it, I do more because I have the thing in my hand. I can go to the boutique and do serial number checks. So I actually went into the boutique in Boston with this watch, and I asked my friend there to look into his iPad and search things up. And he pulled out the entire catalog of the 6 pieces, the 6 models within that collection. And it was the first time I realized, it wasn't just they did a Tank Louis in that collection. They did a Santos, they did a Tank V, and then I was like, there's this whole world that I didn't know of. And whenever I find something that I'm lacking or that interests me, I just go deeper and deeper. And then it was through that process I started talking to a few people on Instagram, and then they've already been very avid collectors of vintage Cartier, and that kind of just accelerated my passion for it.
But that sounds like you could have landed on any brand at the beginning, because whatever brand you would have landed on, you would have done a lot of research into that brand, and then you would have fell in love with that brand.
Yeah.
So that's my first thing. Do you think that is the case? Second thing is, what is it about that brand? I appreciate your story of how you got into it, but then subsequently to stay into it, to fall in love with it. What is it that you fell in love with Cartier?
Yeah. So first question, I think it definitely could have happened with any brand. So now thinking back at it, why my first watch that I bought to start everything off was a vintage Rolex Pre-Daytona. The reason why I bought a vintage Rolex, and I think I might know the reason. It didn't register at the moment, but then it was because I've owned a Rolex for the past 4 years. Maybe it felt the most familiar. Yeah, if I bought a vintage watch of the same brand. And now and then after the Rolex, it quickly went into Cartier. And I think it could have happened with any brand, but then let's say it probably wouldn't have happened with Patek, because back then I was still very, it didn't make sense for me to spend more than $10,000, rarely $20,000 on a piece. And with Cartier, it was less expensive than many of the other bigger named brands out there when it comes to vintage. So it was more accessible to me. Yeah, Alex.
Because I kind of think like Vacheron kind of falls into that category. I think Vacheron Vintage, I mean, some of their pieces are quite incredibly priced. So I thought that would have been something that you would have got into, or maybe.
Yeah, so the story with Vacheron, I actually, right after I purchased the Rolex, I went to purchase a Le Historique chronograph from Vacheron, which was vintage inspired, but then it didn't hit the same spot that I wanted, that I felt with vintage, which is why I quickly went into, I guess with timing, right? Cartier gave me more opportunity and gave me more room to explore because of all the different models and lower price points. Okay. So that's, yeah.
So I want to make a comment here, and it's really for you to kind of disagree or agree. But obviously, since you've been into the Cartiers, and Cartier is quite hot right now, so I'm seeing a lot more Cartier watches, and
probably because of Jaclyn, that's why it's getting hot.
Well, we also have
I can think of a few. I can think of a few
View as well, with his 13 BYVU account. The thing is, I noticed is that it seems to me, right, from a person relatively ignorant, that Cartier were designing so many watches.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, because you design so many different designs out there, a few of them
Mm-hmm.
are obviously going to be successes.
Mm-hmm.
But actually, you've just produced a whole lot of watches, which,
Yeah.
like can resonate, don't resonate, you know what, whatever, I'm
Yeah.
still going to produce them, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
and then because they're quite distinctive differences in the designs.
Yeah.
It feels like, oh, we'll do that. And it was such in a rapid speed. I
Yeah.
feel like, really, did you actually think a lot about it? Because
Yeah.
it's a mishmash, man.
Yeah.
Do you think that's
I
fair or
agree.
not
I
unfair?
no, I completely agree with what you just said. And I think it goes back to the second question you were asking earlier, what actually drew me into vintage Cartier. It was only after like my first purchase of the vintage platinum tank, I started reading up the history. So the first, what most people are, not aware of is that Cartier created the first wristwatch in the history of wristwatches, and that was the Santos Dumont in the early 1900s. I believe it was 1904 or 1907. And then it was about a decade after that Louis Cartier created the Tank Louis. And what most people didn't know of back then was Cartier was a jewelry business. They weren't in the wristwatching, like watchmaking business at all. But it was only because Louis Cartier had a signed contract that I think went up to 25 years with Jaeger-LeCoultre. They started setting up a boutique in Cartier's Paris 13 La Rue store, and then they started doing all these watches. So I thought that was very interesting because it was through joint partnership between two masterminds, Cartier, who made the case designs, who designed the case designs, and Jaeger, who wasn't limited by the case designs. They were working collaboratively to make each piece pretty unique because they looked back then very different, right? They were still testing out prototypes, and this was in the early 1900s. But going back to what you said, Dan, if you look at their collection now, it's just they overproduce, and most of the watches look very much the same, and they are, in my opinion, lacking in that originality of what started in the early 1900s, which is why I think I do adhere to vintage a lot more, because there is that history behind it, whereas now it's more accessorized.
Yeah, the thing is with watches is I appreciate watches which have required thought, right? Rather than just being made on a commercial basis in like mass produced on, we'll try this, it doesn't work, we'll try this, it doesn't work, try this, doesn't work. And that's what I get that feeling with Cartier, and collaboratively with what you just mentioned with JLC. I mean, JLC, they worked with many watch, as I'm sure you know right now. So that to me isn't really a strong selling point. And in terms of history, I feel it's like how you ended up with Cartier first. I think if you ended up with a different brand, you would have read a different history, right?
Yeah.
And also probably got enticed, I would say.
Oh, for sure. For sure.
But what would you actually say your collecting philosophy is?
Can I just say something? I think even
it.
across the different industries, you have the same thing, right? It's like, even with fashion, right? You have all the big fashion houses. Okay, let's just say Fendi, and you're pushing out all these clothes, and none of us want to wear it because it looks ridiculous. It has the Fendi logo, all the stuff, right? But then people who understand the brand, they are going to buy specific pieces that they're known for. So they might go, okay, I need to buy a mink fur coat. So with every brand, you know exactly what you need to buy from that brand. But then you also know they got to sustain their business. So you kind of just ignore the rest of the stuff that they are just pushing out. Yeah.
I agree with that point. And I thought you would come back with that point. But my feeling with Cartier is that, I appreciate that watch houses have to make products for, and they do have to trial and error as well, right? Mm-hmm. But with Cartier, I think it's just taken to another level. and that personally turns me off.
You mean right now with what their current production
Well,
looks
right
like?
now, I mean, totally. I think four of us would agree it's probably not in the forefront of our minds, for our next purchase. Although I have to say, the one with the gold beads, I think it's pretty cool.
Gold beads.
The
You know how it trickles down and you see the panther face.
Oh
Yeah,
my
that's
God,
really
that's
nice,
my
yeah.
most hated one
That's
ever.
cool looking. What are you
That
talking
was
about?
like the worst release. Like even in person, I was like, "This is a
Oh,
joke."
you saw it in person?
Yeah, I saw it in person, and then there was even a Hong Kong one that was limited, and it was green color instead. And they were like, "Should I take up the wrap?" I was like, "No, leave the wrap on. I don't need to see this. It's so bad."
Yeah. But I think, Dan, it's funny that you mentioned the gold beads one, because that's what
That's
I
like the
would say,
worst
like,
one.
I would say like none of us would purchase, right?
Yeah.
But
Yeah, I
then
don't
that's
think-
the one that
none of us would
caught your
purchase it,
eye.
yeah.
But I think
No,
I think the idea is quite cool though, how it actually
Yeah.
fixes
No,
and
I
it goes
think
back
that
down
goes.
again.
I think that goes exactly along what Lungs was pointing out, because like brands put out stuff they know that are probably not going to be the biggest hit, but they still put it out just to
Showcase
tell people, hey,
something.
like, look,
Yeah.
we're still doing something new. We're still doing interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So, what's your favorite piece in your collection right now?
That's hard.
Oh.
Sounds
I
so
don't know.
painful.
I like like favorite piece as in like what I wear the most right now, or if there's a house fire and I could
Yeah,
only
there's a
grab
house fire.
one.
House fire. You've just delayed the answer by asking that question.
I'm sorry. I probably, if I house fire, probably my my basculant, and then the piece that I wear the most right now is my Patek 96.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was
Right.
no rationale behind why the basculant just popped into my head first.
Okay.
Yeah.
That was actually my next question, but you've answered it.
Oh,
So you started with these brands which are, you would say, very high end. What about like more entry level brands such as Seiko, Nomos, and Longines? I mean, it's something
Yeah.
I noticed with Long too. Is actually no. To be fair, you had the J12, but is it that you girls also need to feel that prestige, that brandy feeling, that luxury feeling for them to feel, oh, I really want this? Would you consider those like Seiko, Nomos, and Longines kind of?
I would. I'm looking for Longines. So I'm constantly looking for vintage Longines and vintage.
13ZN, right?
Yep. I'm constantly looking for them, but they're just so hard to find right now.
Yep.
I'm so tempted to get the Longines Heritage. That's like, I feel like that's such a good watch. And I think if I can't find a vintage one, I would definitely find the vintage one first if I could. But let's say after like 2 years of searching, I still can't find one, I'll definitely go ahead and buy the modern heritage inspired
Re-edition,
Longines.
basically, right?
Yeah, I think it's beautiful with the copper dial. It's beautiful.
I found one. I'll send you a link, and I think you might be interested. It actually looks pretty decent.
That would be great. They're so hard to
I'll send it to you
find in
after.
good condition. They're so hard to find in good condition. So I'm constantly on the hunt for those. For Grand Seiko, I really want a spring drive. I really want the Sakura with the pink dial, and also I really like the, I don't know the names, the model, the reference numbers are so long for Grand Seiko, but I want the one with the eggshell colored, really simple,
cream dial,
time only cream dial with the little date, I believe. Those are the two pieces that I would get from Grand Seiko, and then I would definitely get something from Longines, like vintage Longines or vintage Omega, and if I can't find them, definitely something from their modern catalog. But going back to your question, I don't know how Long feels about this, but for me, it's like less so about the brand. It's always more about the design language, which just so happened to be within those few brands that attract me. I don't know, what do you think, Long?
I think it's actually purely just the finishing for me. It's like even with clothes, I don't even need that brand to show. In fact, I think sometimes adding the brand and having the brand on the dial actually cheapens it. But if
Yeah.
the finishing is so good, you just want to buy the best thing you can with the amount of money you have. That's
Yeah.
how I feel. Yeah.
Yeah.
Jaclyn, you
Okay.
mentioned you've got the pre-Daytona. I'm assuming it's the 6238.
6234.
6234, apologize.
Yeah.
But during that time, most of those pieces, let's say Zenith and Hoya, probably had the same sort of movement. So for
Yeah.
you, how would you differentiate between, I mean, was it purely because you was familiar with the brand Rolex that you moved towards that? Given the choice again, would you probably get like a Hoya or something else?
I think so. Back then, I think the brand familiarity played a big part, and also with the movements, I know that vintage Hoyer are very hot right now as well. And back then, I just wasn't aware of them. So if you were to give me like a choice to choose again, I probably still choose a 6234 or a 6238, like you mentioned. But then uh, I would I would definitely be open to like vintage Hoyers. I don't know the reference numbers, but the one that with the black dial and also like the panda face. Um,
2447N. That's my favorite.
yeah.
Yeah.
And you know what I really like with Hoyer? I really like the re-edition they did with Hiroshi Fujiwara, which also
Oh,
looked like a vintage um, playoff of the modern playoff of a vintage design. That I also really liked.
The one I really like is the Universal Genève Nina Rint edition.
I gotta search it up.
Yeah.
Check it out. Just check out Universal Genève Nina Rint. I
Yeah,
think that one you'd definitely buy
yeah. You gotta send it
if
to
you're
me
him.
later. Universal Geneva has some great chronographs and some
yeah,
great time
yeah.
onlys. Yeah, I really want a pole router, but with like a tropical, like even tropical brown dial and no date. That's like
Have you been to that Instagram page called Claremont Vintage?
no
Oh, okay. He deals in Universal Pole
Claremont
Cruisers. Yeah,
vintage.
yeah.
I'll note
I'll
that.
send it to you later.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll note that. Yeah,
But most of your journey, like you said, is you haven't much had offline experience
almost never.
with other collectors, but you have engaged with other collectors. My next question
Yeah.
actually was, have you met any collectors that have actually inspired you? Because I want to just elaborate before you answer. It gets to a point where you see a lot of watches, you research watches. I think we all appreciate that collecting watches can be a bit of a solo journey where you're actually just delving in and just learning a lot of stuff by yourself. And then it's great to share that journey with other collectors, and you then get to see more and more pieces. Eventually you see a lot of pieces and you might become, numb.
Yeah.
And I feel like the people behind is part of the reason why we do this podcast. The people behind the watches is very interesting. And sometimes the way they live their life can be quite inspiring. Well, for me, at least, have you met anybody like that has inspired you in your collection or any other means?
I think definitely yes. I think one of my biggest inspirations, and one of the first people I ever talked to once I created my Instagram account was Ronnie. And he actually, and this guy we're talking, like he owns 200, 300 watches, right? Like almost all vintage. So when I first approached him, I didn't know what to expect because frankly, I didn't even know he was going to respond. But then it was after talking to him and learning about what he sees, like his eye is very particular. You think that someone who owns 200 to, I don't know exact numbers, but like 200, 300 watches buys everything or buys watches for less meaning than they might deserve. But it's only after you talk to him and you ask him about his eye and what he sees in a particular piece, then you realize this guy knows exactly what he wants. And he doesn't care much about the brand, although he focuses on a few. but it's more about the design language of the dial, of the case, and the interplay between the two. So it was, I think he inspired me from a very early, from the beginning, because he showed me that it doesn't mean someone who has 2 watches doesn't know what they're doing, or someone who has 300 watches doesn't know what they're doing. It just all comes down to you knowing what you are looking for and not being afraid of buying less or buying more, just because you know exactly what you want. And I think knowing exactly what you want from the whole array of the watches offered on the vintage or modern market is actually a very hard thing to do, especially down to the detail that he has when it comes to buying pieces. So I think that, combined with his 20 years of collecting journey, and also his personal story, those and being one of the first people I ever reached out to on Instagram, really inspired me a lot.
Well, that's fantastic that you found someone like that. I think probably we all have a
he
story like that.
He has an epic collection, this guy.
Yeah.
Like, nothing he posts, I'm like, what's that? It's like, whoa, it's nice.
Yeah. And most of them are all time onlys, if you pay attention. They're less about complications or grand complications. To him, it's really the dial, the hands, the color of the patina and the case. I think once you really pay attention to these little details and even go deeper and deeper, it really becomes fun. And he has multiples of the same watch. And then I would often ask him, like, why do you need multiples of the same watch? And then he was, like, this is a little bit different or that. And I think that's really interesting.
All right.
Yeah.
I actually have a really random question that's completely off topic. But throughout this conversation, I think a few times you said, I want to purchase this thing now because it's the right time. It's at a good, well, you didn't say at a good value, but it's the right time to buy the piece. So obviously for you, you have thought about whether this is a good way to allocate my money, right?
Yeah.
And I was reading this thing recently, which has never clicked in my mind, because when I buy watches, I used to think where you put your money, that's your investments. And then watches falls into like jewelry, bags, and shoes, which is just extra. It's not part of my portfolio, right?
Yeah.
So when you allocate money for watches, is this part of your overall like portfolio, or it's completely separate?
I wouldn't say it's separate at all. I would say it goes interchangeably between what I own in my portfolio, like the non-tangible things, and my like things that I actually own. I would definitely so I think like the question you're getting to is like, do I see them as monetary opportunities or like investment opportunities? And I definitely do, because it's one thing of buying things that you know for sure will make money and buying that for the purpose alone, and then another thing of purchasing something that you are optimistic about, but it wouldn't, even if it doesn't, like it wouldn't make you sad or mad because you love it so much, right?
Yeah.
But when there is an added bonus of, maybe perhaps later on down the road that this is going to have a 50% value increase, it never hurts to know that, right? Even if it's something that you're never going to sell and that's going to sit in your portfolio. I think it's just a good reminder that you made a purchase decision that turned out pretty great, and at the same time it's something you really like. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah.
Right. With that podcast has kind of like ended up pretty quickly. I'm actually on my last question now.
That's why I was like, I got squeeze in what I want to ask, because I was like, because for someone your age, honestly, I don't think any of us, right, were anywhere close to even thinking, how am I going to manage my money? You know, we were probably like, how are we just going to save for the weekend kind of thing? Like, it's just so amazing. So I just really wanted to know how you thought about allocating money and what it felt like to purchase such big pieces at this age. So I was just really curious.
I think it goes down, and I've made a lot of purchase mistakes, right? Like, don't get me wrong. And some of the pieces were like mistakes in the terms of value, right? But not in terms of like emotional attachment.
Yeah.
But then that's what's nice, right? Because you would let that carry over and make you feel better. But then in terms of like allocation of money, I think sometimes with me, when I buy things, it's more, I wouldn't say I'm very rational in that sense. It's still a lot of emotion behind it, right? Like, I don't know about you guys, but when I purchase something like a watch, yes, I do as much research as I can about it, but then when it actually comes down to purchasing, I would say it's pretty emotionally driven.
Yeah, impulsive.
Yeah, it's almost like an impulsive decision because we don't really need it, right? But we want it really badly. So, and I've actually had a few debates about this topic, about like investment watches being investments or whatnot, because some people, if you were at, and I didn't know this because, well, I didn't bring this topic up with enough people, but then when I did and people would bring it up with me, they were so, they feel so violated when you do ask them, when, like, do you consider your watches as investments? And they feel so like they put their guard up immediately, and they're like, no, like, why would I? Like, I feel like they're just what I buy, and I lose money on them. But then I was like, maybe that's how some people feel. But then for me, it's like, if I can buy something that I love and then that are that have an optimistic future, like, what's the added bonus?
Yeah.
Well, I think a lot of people in Hong Kong actually buy with the idea of investment value. It's something we touched upon last week with the podcast with another collector. So I don't think it's totally
Heard of.
Yeah, unheard of, right?
Yeah. I think maybe just big collectors or some people don't want to admit to it, maybe because they maybe people don't want to admit that when you have, you know, amassed such a great collection, but some people sell certain pieces off, they don't want to admit that it's for like investment purposes. Because
I think it's because it touches very finely on whether you're dealing, and there isn't a clear definition of when you're dealing, or how are you a dealer, or are you a collector, or are you in between? Like, it's very gray. So people are very conscious of they want to compartmentalize in their head, like, you're a collector, you're a dealer, and they can't really accept you being a collector that deals out some of their pieces that make a bit of money. That is not an option in their head, right? So I think that's, and nobody wants to be associated as a dealer as well. Right?
That makes sense.
I keep thinking about the podcast we did last week where we were trying to kind of like sugarcoat that, no, you're not a flipper, and that guy kept saying, I am a flipper.
I am.
Yeah, I think we did that out of respect, but then he was like, no, I'm a flipper. Okay, all right then.
At least he's honest about it.
Yeah.
But I mean, actually, you already that's a very good question, because she mentioned about your age and how you're so, well, I would say light years ahead of what I was at that age. And I mentioned that to you before privately as well, Jaclyn.
Yeah.
But there are a lot of younger people that listen to this. What do you want to achieve in life?
Yeah.
That's a big question. I think there's a big question that doesn't have a clear answer, and I think it deserves much more than a clear, like, one sentence answer, because I think life achievement is something you find out as you go on. But if you're just asking that in terms of the end goal of what I might perceive as a life achievement, I think something along the lines of being able to provide for my family, and by that means is like provide for my children's well-being and education, and provide for my parents' well-being. I feel like it's one's purpose to provide for yourself and for the loved ones in your life, and we work towards that, although we don't really register that as the main goal of our hard work. Because biologically, like as a animal, we provide for, as a social being, we provide for ourselves and those we care for. But how do we do that? I think by having fun in the work that we do in order to provide and meet that end goal is something we figure out as we walk along life experience.
I mean, I think that's a very brave answer to give, because I think a lot of people, they would have just splurged out an answer because they feel like they need to. And what you just said there is, it's kind of okay not to know right now, but I need to find out, and I need to gain more experience, more life experience to find exactly what I want. You didn't say, I'm going to go into investment banking and make a shit ton of money. Actually, money wasn't in your forefront of your mind. And I think you gave a lot of people, the younger people, a lot of confidence there by saying, I don't know. And actually, I'm sure throughout the podcast, they would have listened to this and thought, oh man, this girl knows where she's going. Yeah. But you've actually said it's okay. No, I actually don't know, and you've admitted to it. So I hats off to you for saying that.
No, I feel like it's completely fine, and I can totally relate to what you just said, because coming from in like a place that I went to school, it's always expected of you to answer the golden question, which is, what do you want to do when you graduate? Or where do you see yourself like 5-10 years down the road? And that's the answer to ask at career fairs or during interviews. And of course, if you were to ask me on paper, I have a very prepped answer for you. I can tell you right now. But I don't feel like, because we're so much more beyond that, right? Like, I feel like it's very important to admit, as someone who is a student and who's not yet graduated, that I, of course, do not know what I want to do in life. And I don't want to limit myself by telling you an answer, because people change jobs or people change career paths all the time without them realizing. But what doesn't change, again, is what you do and end up doing, which is, I think, the main purpose, which is to make yourself live comfortably and provide for those who you care for. And in order to achieve that, that's for you to figure out. But I think that is one thing that doesn't change for me. Careers might change, but that end goal doesn't change for me, which is...
that's a very healthy way to think about it, because like, I can talk about myself here. When I chose to do dentistry, I had to make that decision at 14, 15, right? A very young age, which you commit to. As you get older, the longer you spend doing that, let's say, I don't know, like 14 and maybe 10, 15 years you would have invested before you're actually pretty much working into practice.
Yeah.
But it's kind of one of those things, because you invested that time, and you said that you wanted to go this way, you feel obliged to go that way, even if you want to change. And I think a lot of people in that trade, that industry, dentistry or medicine as well, things that you have to really commit to early, suffer from that, because also it has one of those problems as well as being one of those prestigious courses.
Definitely.
And so you feel, hang on, the whole world would get why you would not want to do it, because it's supposed to be the best thing, right?
Yeah.
And I think I would say you don't need to. It's almost impossible to know what you want to do at 14. You just don't have enough experience of things in life. And certainly the amount of courses, well, forget the courses, at high school, the amount of subjects you take doesn't reflect what you could do in life. And certainly the amount of courses you can do in university doesn't reflect the amount of things you could do in your life. That also be successful, give you that ability to provide for your family as well.
I think it takes an immense amount of courage to do either, to be committed to something at a very young age, or to not know what you might want to do and figure that out later. Because a lot of my friends from school, they are in the pre-med track, and they commit to a pre-med track almost immediately after college entrance. And so with a pre-med track is actually quite different from a normalized track. Let's say if you were to study biology, but then you're not pre-med, then those two schedules would look very different. So a lot of the people that I know from school who are pre-med, and I've had this conversation with them a lot of times during, sit downs in dining halls. And you ask them how they're doing or what they've been doing, it's always very systematically planned out. And they know exactly what they're doing during their spring break. They know exactly what they're doing during their winter break. In terms of other people, while other people are finding internships, the pre-med people already know what they're doing. Like they have to study or they have to work in their labs, so they have to write reports. Everything is so planned out rigorously that when you ask them, it's always so refreshing and encouraging, because you see someone so motivated and they're on the path that they've been committed to doing for the past, 5-6 years. But there's always another side of the story, right? Which is what Dan has brought up. The stress and the pressure of not being able to admit that maybe I want to do something more, but after spending the past 5-6 years of my life of committing to dentistry or pre-med, it's hard for me to steer away from that. So I really appreciate the answer that you gave me, because that reminded me of some conversations I've had at school and with my peers, and it's very realistic. It's so true.
The only advice I can give you, Jaclyn, because like the others, I think you have great potential, and I would really like to see you succeed. And I will say at your age, you should explore before you exploit. It might take you another 10 years before you find what your really talents and gifts are. And then once you find what that is, just take full advantage of it. So from now until then, just keep exploring. No harm in kind of like changing out, learning, understanding who you are as a person and what you like.
Thank you. That's what I'm trying to do right now, is to gather as much real world experience as possible, because I feel like I'm still in very much of a bubble right now. I'm still yet to meet a lot more people and get hurt and learn more things. So that's what I'm trying to do as well.
Well, if you ever come down to Hong Kong, Long and I will take care of you and show you around.
I think
take you to some GTGs and stuff.
Both of us.
I would absolutely love that whenever that comes around. Dan and I were talking about like the opportunity of me going back. I'm trying to figure that out currently. Like I really wish to be back by this winter to go back home, because this has dragged on for much longer than any of us had expected, right? So it's actually very hard, and this, between us, it's actually very hard for me to be here without family. Even though, I'm an adult, I'm perfectly suitable to be here and stay here by myself, but it's just like during this time of the world, I miss my family extra. It's so nice to have people to talk about different, topics now online. But at the end of the day, it's like I still miss my mom and my dad. So I'm really trying hard to go back.
I hope you get back soon. I hope we can work something out for you.
Yeah.
Stay strong.
Yeah.
Right. Well,
is it time for the quick fires, I guess?
It was. But then Jaclyn is just like putting questions in my head, you see. So, because I hear her talking and I think, I want to ask another question. So really the final question is, because
we can always do a part 2.
You're a place, well, we can always get you on again anyway. But like as a parent, I'd be very, well, both of you and Long Long, if my girls turned out the way you guys are, I would be like, that's it. I'm very proud, if they turned out
so
like
much.
you guys.
Yeah,
right?
I know. I'm like speechless. Like,
that's like
you don't want that.
But
it's like that means whoa.
What do you think there was anything in your childhood as you grew up, the way you were parented, that has given you basically resulted in where you are today? any key areas or key philosophies, probably key philosophies of parenting that you think, okay, it allowed me to blossom into the person I am today? And that is actually my final question. No more questions after that.
Long, do you want to go first?
Well, why don't you go first?
It's kind of well, you kind of touched upon. I kind of touched upon this like while you were talking, right? Like in your podcast.
You know why it's so hard. I feel it's because I'm sure you're thinking the same thing, which is I don't think I'm that great. So then you're like, what are you talking about? Because I feel like it's really normal. But I think if you generally like grow up in a family where you feel loved, you're in an environment where you feel it's safe to express like what you want, right? Which means that you're built in a way that allows you to kind of dream big. So instead of thinking, okay, for the rest of my life, I can only go and work at a cafe, right? You're fearless. So you feel like, no, I'm not going to work at a cafe. I'm going to own a cafe. So you have the ability to know that you have something to fall back on. So you have support from family, and then you're not as afraid of failing.
I agree. So growing up, I don't know how much of my life story, Dan, you want to hear, but I was a very rebellious kid.
I can see that.
I was rebellious to the point that when I was 14 or 15, I was rebellious to the point that I would not go home and I would go and sleep in soup kitchens in Vancouver. So I would sleep with homeless people because my mom and I would get into such big and intense fights that I literally don't want to see her. And I would skip school. I would buy the last, I would buy a movie ticket at around like 10 p.m. And then I would take a picture of all the movie times that are showing that day. And then after watching one movie from one room, I just go to another one and see another one, and I just see another one. So I basically buy one ticket and I watch all the movies just to avoid from going home. And then after watching all those movies, I would ride my bike in downtown Vancouver and I would go to a soup kitchen. I would sleep there overnight. And I would skip school. And then I was so...
Is that where Gastown is? Is that where you go around, like Gastown area,
Gastown
right?
is the good area. You don't want to be the area that I was in because those were more... Gastown's like the chic area, you know, like less homeless people, more safe. But then I was around like the Chinatown proximity where the soup kitchens were. So growing up, I was very rebellious and I had a very rebellious, I'd say, a year and a half, 2 years. But now thinking back at it, what Long just said, I always felt that there was a safety net for me to fall back on, no matter where I came back from. I made a lot of mistakes growing up, and I got scolded a lot by my parents, but my mom always told me that, you know, it's fine to make mistakes now. It's fine to do these things now, but always make sure I learn my lesson after each mistake I made. But then I would still make them down the road. It's just that with time and I grew up, I learned to appreciate what they told me. And back then it made zero sense, but I think they were just so patient with me and they were so assuring and loving that I could tell them almost everything. And I didn't feel like anything that I did jeopardized our relationship. Yes, I was very rebellious, but then all the things that I did never really jeopardized my family relationship, if not like it made us feel closer. Like it made me trust my mom even more. So now like we're best friends and I tell her everything, and we would joke about, you know, my time of skipping school and doing all these like bad kid stuff. And then she would tell me like, yeah, you really你真的差点气死我. and then we would talk about this and laugh about it. But then I think all of that and how she dealt with me and providing that constant support and love and making me feel like it's okay to fall out and then come back. I think that made me feel like I can do things that I might not know might work out. But
Basically, it gave you
some,
the comfort to try. And I think your
yeah,
story is you're rebellious, I would say strong-willed, and maybe a person that seeks answers. So maybe that
yeah.
manifested at that age in that kind of manner.
And
But
yeah,
yeah,
thank you for
okay.
putting it so nicely.
Well, yeah, it's my skill. Right.
Yeah,
We need
yeah,
to go on the quick fire now.
yeah.
Okay, you
Let's
ready?
do it. Yeah.
Right. If you come back to China, what would be the first thing you eat?
Oh, Din Tai Fung.
Oh,
Okay.
that's from Taiwan. I just want to clarify.
That is
Right.
so bad. But
I'm
specifically
actually
their egg fried
disappointed because I
rice.
think that's pretty standard myself. But
Egg fried
Hey,
rice. Their egg fried rice.
yeah,
Oh my
with the
god.
deep fried pork chop on top.
Oh my god. Their egg fried rice and their truffle xiaolongbao. So good. So good.
right.
Yeah.
What's the best game you've ever played? Because you're a bit of a gamer as well. What's the
I
best game
am
you've ever played?
I am currently what I'm playing right now, which is the PSP4 Legend of Samurai. Highly recommend. Highly recommend.
Right.
Yeah.
Your favorite game character?
Oh, so hard. You can't do this. Like, oh my God. I really like this is not a quick fire, right? Like
It's meant to be quite quick. Yeah.
It's supposed to be quick, yeah.
I know, but it's so
I'll give you a
hard.
countdown.
Okay,
5,
Jin,
4.
which is what I'm playing right now. Yeah, Jin the samurai.
Okay.
Yeah.
Next one. Hardest boss fight.
What I'm currently going through right now, I haven't played since like last week, but basically well, this is quickfire, right? So Jin is assassinating a clan of Mongols to save his friend, but you're supposed to play on ghost mode, which is you can't let them find you, but they're in like a tall grass area and it's like open to broad daylight. So they find you per like every 3 step you take. So it's like almost impossible if you don't like have the right tools.
That sounds so incredibly geeky.
Tools,
Yeah.
yeah. As well.
Right. Most expensive sneakers that you know. Not
That
that
I
you
know.
own, that you know, yeah. What are the most expensive sneakers out there?
That I owned
No,
or
not,
that I
not that
know?
you own, that you know of. Like,
Okay, so
that exist.
I owned a very expensive pair of sneakers, which is the Nike SB Paris Dunks, which
Yeah,
were 202 pairs made ever.
yeah.
And they were part of the city pack. I bought 2 pairs. I owned 2 pairs. One was an 8.5 that I bought for like $1,000, and then one was a size 10 DS. That means dead stock to all you guys, which is brand new, OG everything. Those are going about 30 to 40K right now, and I bought that for $3,500 Canadian.
Nice.
Wait, so it's dead stock and it's still going for that much?
Dead stock. Dead stock is
Alright.
going for about 30 to 40 US right now. And I sold that for I either sold it or I traded it for a pair of October 2 Yeezys,
Okay.
which is the red Yeezys, which they never released, and one of the biggest mistakes. And another pair that I owned was a LeBron James Palmers, reverse Palmers, which were an unreleased edition. It's also size 10. So these were way too big for me to wear, right? They were all bought with, you can say, investment purposes.
Speculation in mind.
Yeah. And those are going for about 10 to 20K. And then
That's
another
ridiculous.
one I bought was a Nike SB Yellow Lobsters, which was a collaboration between Nike SB and Concepts Skate Shop in Boston. And those were a friends and family release of 24 pairs, either 24 or 36. And those I had it in a size 9.5 dead stock. I bought for $1,100 off of eBay from a Concepts employee. And that is going for about like 10 to 20 right now. Yeah.
Wow.
I do not own any of them anymore. I wish I had, but I all pre-sold them before they
Shut up.
hit the potential. Yeah. So,
Right.
yeah.
Name a stereotype that annoys you about lady watch collectors.
Diamonds on watches.
Right, fair.
Diamonds on watches. Yeah.
Okay. What industry titan would you like to meet? Watch industry titan.
Watch industry titan.
Yeah.
I really want to meet Francois.
Oh, okay. From AP.
Yeah, because I've heard a lot of stories about him, and I've stories, but I heard that he's quite a character, and he's quite just not the usual like
Lonely,
CEO.
you've met him.
Yeah, I like him. He's nice. I think you're like him, because I think you're equally drawn to how he. It's not just like he's a watch guy, but he knows how to run a business and everything, right?
Yeah.
So I think that part of him, you're like, yeah.
Yeah, I think I'm interested in knowing like his mentality and his like mindset.
Yeah.
And another one is Francois Paul Journe, just because I heard he's such a
Character.
Yeah. Yeah. He's a hard one. He's a hard one to please. That one. I just wanted to meet him and see like how he actually is.
Right.
But he's a softie
Next
when
one.
you meet him,
Next
right?
one. Right. Next one.
Not the ones I heard.
Can you recommend the next person that we should interview on the waiting list podcast?
Anyone or?
Yeah. Who would you suggest?
I think you guys should okay, I'm biased in this sense. Like I want to say
nickname this the slow fire. Not
yeah,
the quick fire.
I'm sorry. I really, because I'm really considering like this might be such an interest. I really wish if you guys could interview like I'm biased though. I really want you guys to
Who is that? Say it.
Like Roni, but then that's because I have a very personalized relationship with him, and I think that he would be you can ask so many interesting stories off of that. But then I also want to hear it from like a younger perspective as well. So like there's this collector in Singapore, his name is Alvin. He's quite young. I think he's like my age, but then he's amassed a really great collection. He knows what he's talking about. He gets these pieces that are not normally drawn to the mass public, but then he knows why he buys them. And I think there's a great story behind his collecting. I'm sorry, you just asked one, right?
Yeah, I've asked one every time, and you've given me like two or three.
Sorry. Yeah. But yeah.
Right. Last one. Last quick fire. Right. Tell us something we don't know about Harvard.
Okay. So, so there are three things. It's unspoken rule.
3 things. I said one.
No. It's one thing, but then it consists of 3 things. So the one thing is like an unspoken rule of what you must. But how? Okay, is this PG appropriate? Like I don't know. I don't want to.
No, you just say it. Yeah. It doesn't matter.
Yeah. So okay. So there's 3 things that you must do before you graduate. 1 is pee on the John Harvard statue, especially on the shoe where people put their hand on and take a picture. The second one is go into the Whitener Stacks, which to those of you who don't know what the Whitener Stacks is basically the biggest library on Harvard campus, and you're supposed to go all the way underground and basically have stacks within the book stacks that go all the way like this. So it's basically impossible to do. And then the third one is be a part of something called the primal scream, which is before every final period starts, you're supposed to run around Harvard Yard naked. And tourists actually come to watch that.
I'm shocked.
I'm like, what? That's a very good answer.
Which one shocked you? Which one shocked you?
Running around naked.
Well, the one, running around naked. Yeah. But actually, I was still thinking about the first one, because statues are normally like on a pedestal,
Yeah.
Right. So I was like thinking, okay, like as a guy, yeah, but how do you do it as a girl? Like
You climb onto the statue.
yeah.
You
And
climb
then you
onto
have
the
to sit
statue.
in a position or like to
And then
do
you
it.
hold onto it like you're holding onto a
You have to do it on the
tree.
shoe, right? Like so yeah.
So to those who are listening who have plans to visit,
Yeah.
if you wanted to touch the shoe, touch it midweek, man. Like touch it like on Tuesday or Wednesday. Do
But
not
why would you even
touch
want to
it.
touch it?
No, because it's like for good luck. You're supposed to take a picture while with your hand on the shoe. So take
I'm wearing a
your
glove.
take your picture like on Wednesday or Thursday. Do not take it on Saturday, Sunday, or Monday because that's when people get wasted and they do the stupid stuff.
Have you
And
done
then
it?
No.
Oh, that was too delayed. That was too delayed.
No,
I called you out on it.
No, I haven't done one of the things, the three things. Yeah, but I'm not gonna tell you which one.
Okay, well, just the fact that you've done two of them is enough anyway.
Yeah, well, I've done the two that most people would have done.
You said that the library, you said it was basically impossible.
Yeah.
So you could look into that. Maybe you haven't done that one.
Yeah, well, I'm not going to tell you. I've done the two that most people would have done by the time they've reached the senior. Well, I'll tell you. I've peed on the stack. I've peed on the statue and I've ran around naked.
Yeah,
well,
I got you down as those two.
Yeah, because primal, it sounds embarrassing, but it's actually not. Like once you start running, nobody looks at you, right? And you have a towel, so you're not like going out of your dorm and then like butt naked and just waiting there until it hits midnight and then you run. It's like you have a towel and then you wait until it hits midnight and then everyone just takes out their towel and they run. But then when you're running, you don't look at anybody, you just look at your feet, right? Because you want to trip. It's midnight, it's pretty dark. And then once you get to the finish line, you just wrap it back.
Yeah, I would so do that. I would so do that. I'd so do all of it.
Yeah, like so many people have done it. Again, tourists come to watch that for a reason.
Right, so let's wrap this up. Thank you very much, Jaclyn, for joining us. We know that it's late in Vancouver. Hopefully we can have you on again, maybe. We'll see. Yeah. The main thing is we've got to think of some good questions to ask you each time. So yeah. But I can't wait to actually meet you.
Thank you for tuning in to the Waiting List podcast. Hit the subscribe button and the next episode will come straight to your phone as soon as it's ready. Whilst I'm here,
so if you guys
remember to leave a nice review
episode,
follow us on Instagram at the Waiting List podcast.
Leave us a nice review. Otherwise, we'll see you on the next one. Thank you guys for listening.
Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Bye.